Wall Street, tired of the US government overreaching in its enforcement of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, recently formed a lobbying effort to fight back. Lisa, what's got the banks so riled?
The banks are concerned that the US government is extending its long reach and that the US government is looking to make criminal acts that they may have felt were just part of life on Wall Street.
Do you think the banks are justified, and can they even make a difference with this lobbying?
They need some clarity. Is what we've been doing here illegal? There's nothing wrong with seeking some clarity from the US government, and lobbying effort is one way to do that. Quite a heavy-handed one might say, because there is an opinion process where you can actually ask the Department of Justice, is what we're doing illegal? That's not the route they went. They went the lobbying route. So that makes sense that they want clarity. It makes sense that the Justice Department would want to give clarity. Will it make a difference? I think it will make a difference. I think the US Justice Department is a very forceful enforcer, and I think it will make a difference in behavior.
So hiring practices, how can these amount to bribery?
I think the idea is that key and influential individuals would be in some way beholden to the banks. You've hired my son, thank you very much. I'm going to make sure that you get the best treatment available. That's the theory behind this, and it could rear its head in terms of, let's say, licenses in a particular jurisdiction. Let's say you've got the head of some state-owned entity giving favor in some way to the banks. It could be working on loans, any number of transactions where it would help to have a high-placed government official. That's the idea, that they've sought favor with those people for an improper purpose.
But this must be really hard to define, because take Chinese officials, for example, these what they call princelings, who are kin of the high government officials. Are they actually qualified? Because if they are, don't the US government run the risk of discriminating against just people from privileged backgrounds?
If they're qualified, that's the critical question. Are the people who are being hired qualified? Do the banks have the systems and controls in place so that they can show the US government, we came to this with a pure heart. We use the same standards with the princelings as we used with others. Do they know their stuff? Can they deliver? Are they the right person for that job? If the answer to all those questions is yes, I don't think you have a problem, and you don't have a case of discrimination.
Well, from a layman perspective, it does seem kind of cut and dry. You know, either they're qualified or they're not. Is it common for banks to employ unqualified people? Surely not.
You would hope that the banks have the right systems in place. But remember, the US government is interested, and the regulators are interested in, what controls do you have in place? What are you doing, bank, to make sure you've got the right person in place? So it's not just, of course, they're not going to advertise for an unqualified person, but what systems do they go through to make sure that they're getting the right person for the right reason? There's been a level playing field. Just basic employment rules, like, have you let out this position so that the public are aware of it, so that various people have a chance to put forth their application. So it's not just a behind the scenes, you're the president of a big state oil company, I'm the head banker, slip me a CV and let's make a deal. It's a little more transparent than that.
In the US, is it similar to the UK? Because here we have equal employment, where, you know, they have to employ a certain amount of women, people from ethnic minorities, disabled people, that sort of thing. And then you run the risk of, rather than get the person who's right for the job, you just sort of ticking boxes all the time. Is that the same in the US?
Don't we all want a level playing field where the right person, regardless of what their background, gets hired for the job? We don't want only the fancy people to be sitting in the seats. And we also don't want to reward unqualified people just because they're a woman, for example. You and I, being perfect examples. I want to think I'm here for my expertise, not just because I'm a female. And I know you feel the same. So I think we all have the same goals, or should have the same goals. And it's a question of whether just a tick box. That's not a good answer anywhere. I don't think regulators are happy with that.
But this really does seem like more red tape for banks, because surely constantly stifling the financial industry will be detrimental for America's already weakened economy.
You hear about the difficulties that banks and other companies can find complying with the myriad of regulation, whether it's coming down from the EU, the UK, and now we've got American enforcement authorities. Yes, there are a lot of rules, but in this case, It's not, I don't think it's a damaging one. I think what you're getting at is something that I think all parties can agree is a designated good aim.
Now, hiring practices of foreigners, surely there's a grey area there, because the American government has to understand that business practices in different countries are different.
There's no country in the world that says, we don't care who's doing that job, we just want to reward the son or daughter of the prime minister. That is not ever going to be what goes.
Maybe not out loud.
Or maybe not out loud, exactly. I mean, I think that's, regardless of differences, I don't think you're going to find this difference there. At least in the FCPA area, what you've got is very much joined up law enforcement efforts, very much joined up regulatory efforts.
But anti-bribery rules aren't universal, are they? So could this sort of law make Wall Street less competitive to other world financial capitals, such as London, for example?
I don't think any jurisdiction wants to be seen as the lowest on the Transparency International Index. That is not a badge of honor. So I think what you've seen is, across the board, countries raising their game, and now a much more level playing field where each country has something quite similar to the FCPA. So I don't think it's going to knock anybody out of the box on the competitive side.
So a lot of big name banks are caught up in this. I won't obviously name them, but what sort of impact will this have on such large organizations and indeed their customers?
Some of these enforcement actions can be seen as a blunt tool, but the wave then, in an ideal world, is to shape behaviors going forward so that that rule book that says we must be fair in hiring gets taken out of that risk officer's drawer, dusted off, and actually used at these very organizations that are now bearing the hard end of government attention.
So finally, the result of this lobby will have significant impact on companies that have dealings overseas. Should they be concerned?
Companies should be concerned because the US government has shown that it is not shy to prosecute actions. We know that in 2014, the US government had $1.25 billion in its coffers due to FCPA enforcement actions and FCPA cases. $1 billion of that was from 2 cases only. So we're talking about a government that is not at all hesitant to put forth its laws and rules wherever they see a problem.